Welcome to Common Prophets. In this video, we shall explore whether the decline of India in the last 1,000 years may have some philosophical roots. We know that the cities of Indus Valley were about 10 times larger than those of Sumer and Egypt. When there were only city-states in Greece, at that time, the Mauryan Empire flourished in India. When the Roman Empire existed in the West, at that time we had the classical age of Hinduism in the Gupta Empire. And after that, while the Western civilization went into a low key, our civilization had Harsha and other empires. But beginning 10th century CE, we can see a decline in the stature of the Indian civilization. The question is whether the present Hindu philosophy encourages us to engage with the world and to seek progress of civilization and humankind, or it encourages us to become introvert. Because if we become introvert, then it is a logical consequence that the external world, the country, the civilization may not flourish because we were inside. We are focusing on our inside. Let us begin with Gita. In Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna that you must engage in war because you are born a Kshatriya. The basic understanding is that every human being is born with certain vasanas or desires from his or her past lives, and he or she has to act in this world to exhaust those desires so that he can become free and happy. But the real question is that after the exhaustion of one's inherited desires and after one has attained the sense of bliss, what does one do? Does one become introvert and enjoy the bliss, or does one become extrovert and work without attachment for the progress of humankind and human civilization? The answer to this question depends upon whether we consider Brahman, that is Brahma, to be desirous or free of desires. If the Brahman or the entire universe is desirous, then logically, after we have exhausted our own personal karma, then we should engage to fulfill the desires of Brahman. But if the Brahman is desireless, then after we have exhausted our desires, then we can become introvert because there is nothing more to be done. In our study, we do not find any support for the idea that Brahman is desireless. The Chandogya Upanishad says, "In the beginning, dear boy, this was being alone, one only, without a second. That being willed, may I become many, may I grow forth." So the being willed, there was some desire in it, some will in it, which led it to become many. The Taittiriya Upanishad says, "The Brahman desired, I may become many. He undertook penance. He created all this by undertaking penance. Then he entered the creation." So why did he undertake penance? To create. But why did he want to create if he had no desires? The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, "In the beginning, this was self alone, but he felt no delight. He wished for a second. He then made his self fall into two, and thence arose husband and wife." So he found no delight in being desireless. Or we can say that he sought delight, which is again a desire. The Yoga Vasishtha says, "This Brahman obtains to growth in itself by itself." So why does Brahman obtain to growth? Even the word Brahma means to grow. The Mundaka Upanishad says that Brahma grows. So my sense of our Vedas and Upanishads is that they say that Brahman is full of desires, and because he had desires, therefore he wanted to become many, therefore he created. It can be said that these verses that I have quoted, they relate to Para-Brahman, or the second manifestation of Brahman. In the Hindu tradition, there is a Para-Brahman, which is the absolute, and the Upper-Brahman, which is its second level manifestation. But that begs the question, because why did Para-Brahman manifest as Upper-Brahman? If Para-Brahman has no desire, then why should he manifest as Upper-Brahman? And if he manifested as Upper-Brahman due to some desires, then Upper-Brahman continues those desires, as said in the previous verses, I want to become many. Now, contrary to these statements, there are other statements in the Vedas and Upanishads that seem to indicate that Brahman is desireless. The Kathopanishad says, Brahman is desireless. It is never contaminated by the misery of the world being outside it. Here, the word contaminated is lipt or attached. And the word lipt means smeared, anointed, soiled, defiled. So what this is saying is that Brahman does not get defiled or soiled by its activity. So if you have pure desires, then you don't get soiled by the action or the results of action. So I don't think this verse establishes that Brahman is truly desireless. In the same way, in Gita, Krishna says, O Arjuna, there is nothing in the three worlds that should be done by me, nor there is anything unobtained that I should obtain, yet I engage in action. So here, Krishna is saying that he has everything. That is, his vasanas has gotten exhausted. He feels one with the world. But why does he engage in action? He has to engage in action because he wants the growth of his large self, or growth of this universe. Otherwise, there is no need for Krishna to engage in action. But still, the question remains, why does Krishna says that there is nothing in the three worlds that should be done by me? My sense is that these statements are made to help a person disengage from his personal desires and to connect with the larger desires of Brahman. It is something like a manager. A manager has to disengage with his personal likes or dislikes and connect with the desires of his master, of his boss. Similarly, the statements like there is nothing in the three worlds should be done by me are made to get the person to disengage from his personal desires and to connect with the desires of Brahman. Similarly, in Vivek Chudamani, Shankara says, Brahman alone is the real and the phenomenal world is unreal. Now here again, when Shankara says the phenomenal world is unreal, it means that there is more to the world than the phenomenal world. So you want to have an apple or you want to have a banana, that's good. That is not what will give you the true happiness. True happiness will come when you connect with the desires, with the Brahman. So Shankara, despite having said this, engaged in action throughout his life, and very active action. So if there was no desire of Brahman, then why should Shankar himself have engaged in action? Yet another verse is from Chandogya Upanishad. It says, there is no change in the being. Now this implies that it cannot become many, because there is no change, then it cannot become many. So it will be contradictory to the earlier verses. The example is given that when you make a pot from the clay, the essence remains the clay, which is true. But the quality of the clay can change. The clay can be soft, it can be burnt, it can be porous, it can be solid. So the fact that the clay is clay does not mean that it is changeless. So when it is said that there is no change in the being, I would interpret it as that there is no change in the desires of the being, and the being continues to desire its own growth and the growth of this entire universe. At the end of the day, the question is that after one has done his karmakshay or exhausted his inherited desires, what next? Does one become introvert and enjoy his bliss, or one becomes extrovert and continues to work for the progress of the universe? My sense is that because the Hindu tradition stresses that Brahman does not desire anything, therefore our greatest people have become introvert. They have ceased to work for the development of this country, this civilization, this universe, this humankind. And that is the reason why India has declined. I have met a number of monks who say, if you desire, then you can engage in action. If there is no desire, then don't engage in action. So the message that comes out is that action is worthless unless you have to exhaust your own desires. The entire focus is on self, not on this humanity, not on this universe. And this focus on the self negates the desire of Brahman. Let's look at it this way. If Brahman desires for this universe to evolve, and we say that Brahman does not have any desires and all that matters is your introversion or your bliss yourself, then you do not act as per the desires of Brahman, and you actually are opposed to Brahman. And this opposition to the desire of Brahman may be the philosophical roots why India has declined over the last 1,000 years. Let us not forget that the Quran says, "Did you think that we had created you for a playful purpose and you were not to return to us?" So here there is a clear statement that Allah created us. Allah created this universe for a purpose. So this statement of the Quran is totally consistent with the verses that I have quoted about the desirous Brahman, and it is contra the tradition which says that Brahman does not desire anything. I think the time has come for us to look more deeper into the reason why India has been declining, and today it can be said that we are even struggling to survive in our limited area. The reason may be that we have negated the desires of the Brahman. As a result, the universe, the Brahman, is not supporting India in its growth and effervescence. I have published a paper on this topic in the International Journal of Philosophy, Science and Theology. The link to that paper you can find in the description of this video. Please do read the paper and please do provide your critical comments. Thank you, and I hope to see you again.